This morning. So I'm Julia McQuillan. I'm chair of the sociology department at UNL. I'm also a professor there. This was my first job after I got my PhD. I graduated, came to Nebraska, and started as a professor, and I've been here ever since, and I love it. And one of the things I love is all the opportunities to have really amazing collaborations. So the project that I'm going to talk about today, my involvement started when I was director of the Bureau of Sociological Research, and Judy Diamond came to the Bureau and said, we need some help figuring out if what we're doing is working. We're doing outreach with youth, and we want to know if we're making a difference. So I love a challenge, and I was like, hey, I think we can do this. It's so much harder than I thought it was going to be. But I jumped in and tried, and we had a lot of fun, and we ended up publishing it. I'll tell you a little bit about that, which was even better. And I love dual-purpose data collection or multi-purpose data collection. So if I can collect something that's going to tell me if the intervention or outreach worked, and I can also do basic sociology research on that and get a publication about that, that's multiple purpose, and it's really exciting to me. So those kinds of partnerships, that's one of the messages I want you to take away from this today, is that partnering with social scientists, they might get a lot out of it as well. It doesn't always work, but it's nice when it does. So Judy invited me to be part of her next proposal for a Science Education Partnership Award. This is funding from the National Institute of Health, and they want to rapidly disseminate emerging basic science in the health fields. The funding almost got cut, and then let's see if did I do that correctly? Yeah. So then a bunch of people lobbied, and the funding didn't get cut. So we thought we had 5 years. Then we thought we had 2 years. Now we have 5 years. But they wanted us to change it a little bit of the focus. So this is a partnership between the Morrill Hall, the Science Museum, the Department of Sociology, and the Virology Center with Charlie Wood and his basic science research on viruses. So what I'm going to talk about today, I know I'm going to run out of time because I try to do too much always in my life. It's kind of my MO. So the whole talk will be up on our webpage. All of our prior talks are on our webpage. Our publications are on our webpage. Some of you may end up wanting to have copies of the survey I'm going to talk about. That won't be up on the webpage yet. We're working on a methodology report. So as soon as that's up, it is. So you can Google World of Viruses. You can Google or search Biology of Human, and you'll get our webpage, and it's right at that link, and you can pretty much get what you need. You won't have me telling you about it in a really awesome way, but you can see it on there. Okay, so big issue is keeping kids in science. And I want to say that I'm not just concerned about keeping them in science careers or science education tracks, but being science literate. I believe, like I think most of you do because you're here today, that we need a science literate population. There are simple things. There are people from Colorado who are talking about whether or not to vaccinate your kids. Really basic things like saving the planet. So I want to know, how can we get all kids wanting to be a science kind of person, even if they're not going to have a science career, that they don't turn off when it's science, but they pay attention, they tune in, they want to know more. And as all of you probably know, white boys are more likely to want to become scientists than anybody else. And so some people think that maybe there are certain groups of people that don't want to be into science, like women or minorities. But other people say, no, everybody's a scientist in the crib. We just have to keep it going. Everybody's curious. They want to find out things. They want to explore. They're kind of, if I drop this one, my parents pick it up. If I drop this one, my parents pick it up. If I scream, will they come get me? If I scream, will they come get me? So kids are doing that all the time, and they are scientists. They're exploring. They don't call it the scientific process. They don't say this is my hypothesis, but they're doing it, and we kind of beat them out of them. We make it really boring. Memorize these terms, write this down, memorize this, write this down. You have to know this, memorize this, blah, 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 blah. I sound like Charlie Brown, right? And that's partly because of a lot of things, cultures of testing, changing fads in teaching, all kinds of things. So you're all really awesome because you're trying to get the science out there in multiple ways, partnering with teachers, partnering with after school, partnering with media, making it really exciting. And so that's what we're trying to do too, a lot of informal and working with teachers. So we wanted to know, how can we get everybody to be able to engage with science, and how can we make science relevant? So that's what we're bringing in. I haven't heard it today. Maybe you've talked about it. I haven't heard it. But the idea, some of the basic theory ideas of why do we do this versus that? Why do we talk about movies rather than comic books? Or why maybe we could is it better to sneak science into TV than it is to do a documentary? We don't know. We don't know if it's better to be explicit or if it's better to be implicit. We don't know if it's better to do it after school, if we don't know if it's better to do it in the summer, or to have it be throughout school. We don't know if it's better to have it in fiction, if you have it throughout the curriculum, so that what you're learning in math and science and in your English books and in your drama and in your music connects the math and science throughout. The physics of baton twirling, the physics of cheerleading, or physics of football, right? So we don't know sometimes. So I'm trying to bring a theoretical framework to it. Sociologists, we're really interested in social structure, social forces. So I'm going to talk about 3 concepts. I could probably talk about 50 that might be useful, but I picked 3 that I thought might be the most relevant for science communication. I'm going to try to go through this really quickly. Social structure, social location, schema, and identity. These are some big ideas that we talk about. Social location is this idea that I have to read this. I found this new book that I like the way they describe these concepts better than some of the other things I've done. So most of you probably already know these ideas. You probably had to take Soc 101 at some point. Social location is the idea that where we are in a social structure influences exposure to identification with specific structures. This is so social science jargon. Let me get to the picture of it. Basically, it's patterns of life. And so basically what we mean is that there's stratifying systems where we have hierarchies, not just different, but we say boys are better than girls, we say whites are better than non-whites, higher education better than lower education, but there could be subgroups where this could be different, right? There could be parts of our society where we mix it up, we say girls are better than boys, or minorities are better than majorities, or we're all just the same. This is the party line, although for somehow the reality is white boys end up in science more than everybody else. And so there are some structures, and there are also the idea of intersections. So we don't know, with the order of science, is the order by gender, by race, ethnicity, or by class? Because we're not just one identity. We're not in just one social location. We have a more complex. We could also bring in ability. We could bring in sexuality. We could bring in religion. We could bring in other intersecting social categories there. So that's one possibility, but we don't know. And it could depend upon what we're looking at. Right? Could depend upon other things. So then we're going to go to schemas. And schemas are really popular right now. And some people don't like the idea of schemas because it's sort of like the nice way of saying that you're racist or sexist. Right? So they're saying, no, we have to say people are racist or sexist. And other people say, well, actually, people will listen more if we say they have implicit biases that they can't help. It's the way the brain works. Our brain automatically categorizes. And without us even knowing it, we're doing it. And that's influencing our interactions. I think both are true. I like schemas because I think that they do capture just how the brain works. And we can work on them without people getting defensive. So this idea of implicit schemas, here's a depressing fact. I was teaching something this morning, and I took the implicit attitudes test from Harvard, and they have one on science, and I'm really sexist when it comes to science, which is so sad because I've been working for the last 10 years on these NSF and NIH grants to integrate science and bring more women to science, and my brain has not figured it out yet. So I need more images of women in science. I need to be exposed to that more. You would think I worked, anyways, I won't go into my defensiveness. It's just really depressing. So if you're wondering about yourself, go ahead to this Implicit Harvard, take one of the tests, and I hope you do better than me. So who can be a scientist? We hope anybody can be a scientist, right? But most people are going to think of Einstein. And then the classic draw a scientist. How many of you have heard of draw a scientist? Most of you, some of you. This was a classic test from the 50s. We had kids draw a scientist. It was white men. And it still tends to be white men blowing stuff up. This is Mark Reep, only kidding. I just took this off the internet. I have no idea who drew this or who they're thinking of. It could be. So what is identity? So we've got social structures, we've got schemas in our brains, and then we've got identities, who we are. And that depends upon how other people treat us and how we think we can fit. So if we think the image of a scientist is a white man and we're not a white man, but we think, I can't be a scientist because I don't fit the image, or other people won't see me that way, they won't take me seriously. I'm not going to go into all this, but basically the idea of identity is who we think we are. And the question I'm going to ask kids is, on a scale from low to high, do you agree with this sentence? I think of myself as a science kind of person. So that's what I mean by identity in this context. So the looking glass self is the idea of we see ourselves and how other people see us. And the idea here is that, do I have a little pointer? No. So my mom sees me as an angel. My girlfriend sees me as really strong. My older brother sees me as a weakling, and my girlfriend sees me as a devil. So the idea that other people see us, and if other people see us as a scientist, we might see ourselves as a scientist. So this is the big complex model that pulls it all together. I'm going to keep going. So we explored a bunch of questions. I'm going to just show you the answers. So the big idea that we brought in that we haven't seen before is the idea of discovery orientation. I give credit there. I don't know where this came from, but at the bottom it's from the Mod Podge bookshelf. And my idea here is that most kids have discovery orientation. If we don't use the word science, we're not going to trigger the schema of white male. If we just look at discovery orientation, we shouldn't see any differences by gender and race. If we evoke the word science, then we might trigger gender and race, even among middle school kids. So if we can show you that discovery orientation doesn't differ by gender and race, but science identity does, then we need to figure out what are the social mechanisms that are barriers to some kids becoming scientists. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so that was the big question. So how do we measure discovery orientation? We're trying to get at this idea. Let's see. The other thing is mediators, the social processes. I like it. I'm good at it, self-efficacy, and it's important. So we're going to say discovery orientation could go directly to being a science kind of person or could be through social processes. And I don't know where I put the discovery orientation questions, but they're things like I'm curious, I like to collect things, I like to take things apart. Never using the word science. I'm not going to go through it. We have multiple items for most things. We also look at that looking glass self, what do my teachers and parents think of me, and in general, what do other people think of me? So, and then that last question is, how much do you think you are a science kind of person? So we actually have tried out this theoretical model using a middle school in the Midwest, highly diverse. We had 441 students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. This was about 2 years ago. It's a highly minority school. It's also high poverty, about over 80% free and reduced lunch. So basically, remember I showed you that social stratification idea? Well, here, the discovery orientation is the first bars, and these are white boys, white girls, and minority girls. There's no difference in discovery orientation. So our theory was supported that when you don't use the word science, you don't trigger the schema. But when we ask about science identity, the blue bar, the first blue bar, those are the white boys. Many more of them said that they were a science kind of person than all the other groups. You see how all the other groups are lower? And those stars, it's significant, but it's not a random sample, so I'm not sure what that really means. Science competence, I'm good at it. The boys are higher than the girls, the minority boys and the minority girls, white and minority boys. We didn't have enough cases to separate out different minority groups. Science competence is the boys. Science relevance, science competence, it's white. I'm wrong about that. It's white, the white boys and the white girls. Science relevance, it's race ethnicity. It's the two minority groups and the two white groups. Science enjoyment is about white boys. They're higher than everybody else. And that suggests maybe we could do something to make science more enjoyable for more groups, that somehow the way we're doing science is connecting with white boys and not other groups, and that's where your science communication can have a big impact. And then science self-verification are the white kids see, other people can see them, the white girls and boys. And then generalized other is more about the white boys. In general, other people see me as a science kind of person. So putting diverse images, putting girls in to your science communication could have an impact. There's a really great TED Talk on this too, and some basic research on changing the automatic associations between gender and race and science. You can make a difference in broadening science. This is what happens when we put it all together in one complex model. And so we have discovery orientation. When we look at the bivariate correlations, they're all highly correlated, but it's all through social processes. So there's a really strong direct association between discovery orientation and science self-label. It matters if you are curious and explore and everything. But how you get to say I'm a science kind of person is through these social processes. They matter. And enjoyment is one of the biggest ones. That's a 0.69 up there for enjoyment. And down at the bottom is the generalized other. And in general, other people could see me as a science kind of person. What doesn't matter is self-efficacy, which is where we put most of our energy in saying science is hard and we're going to make people work. That's important. I'm not saying you shouldn't help people learn science, but it's not the whole thing. Enjoyment matters and other people seeing you and saying, hey, look, you asked a scientific question. Hey, you're curious, you're exploring, you're taking it apart. You're really into this. You are a science kind of person. So just briefly, we also did some research. We do our science outreaches with comics. You could check that on the page. We also do after school and summer and some other things in teacher professional development. But the big thing here is that Why does it matter to know somebody's science identity? Because here what we did is compared essays and comics. And the essays for the high science identity kids, it doesn't matter, they're higher, right? So you go low to high, the white bars, the essays, they're more likely to say they'll read more, the higher their science identity. But the comic books, everybody likes the comic books better. Everybody wants to read more comic books, but look at this low science identity kids. They're as highly, they got the comic, they're as likely to want to read more as the high science identity kids that got the essay. You can have an impact with creative outreach. It was same content. There was no difference in their knowledge between the comic and the essay. But the low science identity kids that got the comic, they wanted more. And that's what we want, right? We want them to keep wanting to do more. So we're continuing to do other work. We're doing some social network analysis. Really exciting findings about kids more likely to become friends if they're both into science among girls and among boys, but boys form social groups around science where girls are spread out. So we think some of those social groups might be protective for staying in science. More to come on that. We're in the process with that. We've got a new comic book coming out. It's only online. It's free. It's out now. It's about microbes. It's called Occupied. We're occupied by microbes. It's really cool. I learned so much about microbes in that. Kind of flipped me out. I have a whole different sense of who I am. I'm a village. And we have sticker books for little kids. And you can learn more on our webpage, and I'll be happy to answer questions.